This podcast is all about giving back. No strings attached, no funny business, no get-rich-quick schemes, but simply to provide some of mine and our amazing co-hosts their wisdom, stories, and hopefully some valuable insights. Together we have the ability to grow, sustain, and provide a healthy work-life balance for all the cleaners and restorers. As this is totally free, please subscribe, write a review, and share this podcast today. Now onto the show. Hi everyone, and welcome back to the Professional Carpet Cleaners and Restorers podcast. So last fortnight we started discussing the administration of a remediation claim. Some great points were pointed out, some hot topics, and also introducing Lydia. G'day again, Lydia. Again, thank you again for last fortnight. And let's see if we can get through some more golden nuggets for this fortnight. So welcome along. So just finishing off from last fortnight's episode, we went through the new performance criteria of the Cert 4 and specialised cleaning. And we sort of finished up on the lines of the documentation of how to build a scope. And I suppose where we want to take it from there is that taboo area of pricing, costing, where the market is today. And look, we're not going to say names, obviously. That's not what we're here to do. But we're here to give a picture of where the industry is as of February 2022. On our thoughts of the difficulties as far as the administration team goes on, I suppose, finding every dollar and why you need to find every dollar. The cost of business, obviously there's a lot of downtime if you're only doing remediation. How does that affect the business? And then we'll sort of close it off with how do we prepare the last documents? How do we get that off, and how do we get payment as quick as possible? So that's sort of where we're going to go with this this fortnight's podcast. So I suppose when we're determining price or the structure of price, is every claim you get is it the same price structure, or is it different? Is there different prices for one opposed to another? And do you know why?
So every supplier has a different pricing structure. For example, some suppliers we have to use a room rate, so it goes off how many square meters are in a room. Other suppliers are labor and equipment.
Okay.
It depends on also the insurance company. So one supplier might work for 3 or 4 different insurance companies, which means that we have 3 or 4 different pricing structures that we have to work within. So from a pricing point of view, it can be quite complicated.
So how do you then train staff? Does everyone, all your staff members, do they, I suppose, scope to quote? Do they invoice? How is it? How have you sort of measured up your team? I suppose, how big is your team? Have you got direct roles for them, or do they cross-pollinate between?
So I've got 4 people up in the administration team. I've got an accounts and workplace health and safety officer, and the other 3 are claims managers. So for me, it's really important that everyone can do everything from the triaging to invoicing at the end of the claim, because what would happen if my accounts lady, heaven forbid, got hit by a bus? We need people to understand the costing and how to do stuff in case someone's away or is on holidays. So for us, it's about transparency. So setting up cost calculators that make it easy for everyone in the team to understand how to cost something. It also triggers the girls to look for something. So have we charged for PPE? Have we charged for chemicals? Was there waste disposal? So it's important for you to have good cost calculators so that everyone is costing the same.
Yeah. What do you see is the main area of, and I guess I think I'm going down the pathway is wastage, if you know what I mean. I suppose wastage for me is articles that can't be claimed for or have been missed out.
Yep.
Like, what is the biggest thing you see? And again, for those who are new coming into the industry, wastage is a real thing. The dollar value associated with your time, opposed to a piece of equipment, in my opinion, is well undercapitalized. They expect you to drive for free, talk for free, all that sort of stuff. So as far as that goes, where do you see the most wastage in a remediation company?
For us, I don't like saying wastage because to me it sounds like it's not valuable, but for us it is our administration time. So most of our claims we can charge anywhere from $30 to $120. That doesn't even cover the time that the girls spend triaging, doing the reports, all that sort of stuff. The other big thing is, like you said, driving to and from site. So even when it is a labour and equipment charge, we can only charge labour from the second we step on the site to when we step off the site. So you might be covering a large area and have to travel half an hour to and from the job site. That's an hour of labour that you cannot charge for.
Yeah.
I think the other wastage or the other issue that we have is our prices are dictated to us. So the labour hours, the rate that we can charge is significantly lower than what it actually costs to pay for the employees' wages, their super, their tax. Not only that, the vehicle costs, the fuel. So to keep a technician on the road is actually a lot higher than what we can charge for. So that is a massive issue in our industry as well.
Yeah, and I suppose the training, like that money's got to come from somewhere to do the training. So, and I guess that's why we see in the industry a vast difference of companies as well. So nothing against the companies in the industry having a go. I'm all for everybody having a go. There's enough work for absolutely everybody. And again, I think education is underutilized a lot in the industry, if I can say that. And I guess I'll bring in CARSI. CARSI is the Cleaning and Restoration Science Institute, who is our major sponsor. And the object of CARSI is to bridge those gaps, as well as administration, management, the technicians, but to get the most value from, I suppose, each one of those technicians out there making money, because the realistic part of this industry is that administrative teams are virtually valueless. They're there because we need them and we couldn't do without them. But the cost of having administration teams comes from the equipment that's put out there. It doesn't come from anything else. It's not something that we actually can charge for at a realistic rate. And that's very disappointing as the industry moves towards more administration as well. So
just to expand on that as well, it takes administration the same amount of time to process a claim that is a large water job, a full house. We still have to do the same triaging, the same reporting, the same contact levels, so sending out the SMSs, the phone calls, as we would for a job where we can only put 2 pieces of equipment in because it's a tiny section of a wall that's wet. So regardless of the size of the job, we are still putting the same amount of effort and time in. So there is a big difference between what we can charge for a full house to what we can charge for one room. So it's unfortunately more often than not, it's the smaller jobs that we're getting as opposed to the larger ones, which are what we rely on to keep us afloat.
So, okay, so being administration, how do you get the best out of your team, knowing that there is a lot of cost? Again, this comes down to systems, but how do you build systems to implement? How do you find a deficiency and go, well, that's a deficiency, we need to speed that up? What is the process there that you have?
So firstly, I think it's just writing down everything you do in a day. So it might seem quite time consuming, but are you spending 20 to 25 minutes sending SMSs manually? Are you spending half an hour retyping people's emails and copying them across? What are the things that are actually taking you the most amount of time? Are you spending So for our triage questions, we have about 15 odd questions that we ask, but the
Okay.
girls get through those in about 5, maximum 10 minutes. So is it that you've got someone in your team who's a little bit extra chatty? Do they need some training on how to get the information out of someone without keeping them on the phone for half an hour? So for me, everything is about analysis, taking a step back and looking at how things are done, what's taking the most amount of time, and then working out what we need to improve on.
Yeah. So again, that's so SOPs are standard operating procedures, is what we're talking about here. Um, the implementation of those, who writes those up? Is it something you write up, or do you write them up with with your team, or the team write them up? What's that process of an SOP?
So it just depends. Some of them that I can write up if they're quite easy. Other times it involves other people getting on board because they're the ones that are actually doing the work as well. I think it's really important as a manager not to dictate to your team what they should be doing without understanding how they're doing it. So once again, we go back to that change management, is getting people involved in the process. People are more likely to sign off and adapt to things if they're involved in creating them as well.
What does an SOP look like? Can you run through an SOP off the top of your head? If you can't, but
It's a safe operating procedure. So it's basically goes through what the task is and how it's meant to be performed. So SOPs, you can have a template. We use a template that was provided from another company. So we actually got some professional advice on how to do it to make it the most efficient and get all the information out. But I'm sure if you Googled it, you could find a template that you could start building and finding out what information you need to put in there as well.
Cassie have it as well. So Cassie,
Perfect.
So you can go to www.cassie.com.au and have a look at that as well. So
and that's going to save you so much time rather than recreating the wheel.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, all right. So we've determined that administration is undervalued. Looking out now, what are some of the ways do you think that we could now start valuing administration more? And how much administration is enough or not enough?
So while we don't actually get paid from suppliers for our administration time, what we do get is we get more jobs. So because we're doing the work correctly, we're now getting more allocations, which increases our profit as a business. So there is still value there, provided you're doing it efficiently. The other thing is, for example, with the cost calculators. So the girls are trained to identify where potentially we've missed doing a step, or do we need to change how the boys are operating to get the most out of what we can charge. So ensuring that you have skilled people in admin while you can't actually charge for them, it is so important because it's going to increase the business that you can take on as well.
Yeah, and again, time is money. So if you can have those procedures in place, all set out, and everybody's following the same steps, it's a repetitive thing as well. You get quicker at it, and therefore, and again, you're talking about getting the reports out on time. What is on time? What's a week, 2 weeks? What's on time?
No, so within 24 hours. So from the time the technician attends this job site, we have 24 hours to get all of our reports and photos through to our suppliers.
And what's involved in the report? What are you sort of sending over? What sort of information?
So our reports are quite detailed. They're done through PDF. So the boys will fill those out on site. They'll take their photos in a separate program. So for the administration team, we're consolidating all the information. From those reports, we then work out what the costings are. So we create a cost calculator. So the report, the photos, and the costings have to be sent through for every attendance.
Okay.
So throughout the whole process, we're updating our costs, because you don't want to get to the end of a job and for your supplier to say, well, I didn't know that was going to be the price. Otherwise, I would never have approved it. So once again, transparency, it seems like a lot of effort, but it can save you thousands upon thousands of dollars just by getting the information through.
and again, with limited but tight profit. And again, let's talk about profit. Um, Again, we don't have to go into your company's profit on jobs and that, but there has to be profit because there has to be a percentage of downtime and restoration. Is that what you're finding? There has, like,
Correct.
yeah.
So
So
we're obviously the busiest during storm season. And then we need to be able to have earned enough profit during those busy times to sustain the employees that we have during the quiet time. Your biggest asset as a business is going to be your employees. So you don't want to train someone up for 6 months and then have to let them go and lose all that information that you've that's where the biggest cost is when you're first training an employee. So for us, it's ensuring that we optimize during our busy period so that we can weather the quiet period as well. Another thing that we do really, really well is we identify when further scopes or works are required. So a lot of our profit comes from those additional scopes of works. It's not just about getting the building dry, it's returning it to pre-loss and identifying when further works need to happen.
yeah, so that now brings me into the value of administration. Although you seem like you're not getting paid for your administration upfront, the value is in really knuckling down with your team there, I suppose, to find those extra ways to cover costs. And that is by obviously getting away from the square meter or room rate
Mm-hmm.
and going into that time and material rate. So what is the process there of getting the girls to actually start thinking? Because I know with most staff, it's, it's a job. They just go in and do their 9 to 5 and off they go. How do you get that mindset changed to actually have guys, we really do need to look at the bottom line, and we need to keep the guys busy. So do you have weekly meetings with your administration staff, or
Yeah,
how
so
does that look?
we actually have weekly meetings with not only the administration team, but the technicians. So we do the meetings together because we don't want to segregate people. We need the administration team to understand what the technicians are doing and the technicians to understand what the admin team are doing. For us, the technicians are the ones that identify when a scope of works is required. So an example of how admin has helped in a sense is we've created templates that make us look professional. We also follow up the scopes of works actively. So previously they would kind of go out into the universe and we didn't know what we were meant to be following up. So implementing a procedure where we have tasks to say when we need to follow up scopes of works means we're getting a much higher conversion rate and approval rate for them. So having that extra person on who knows how to make unfortunately, a lot of the time it's visual, so making the scope of works look pretty, having the map attached, having the costings look pretty on there, that makes it easy for people to read and they're more likely to approve. So
That's right.
that's just as vital as the boys identifying that a scope of works is needed, doing up the scope of works, and everything's a team effort. You've got to have that cohesion between the two teams.
So what sort of systems do you have in the administration team there? What are you running?
So we created a template for the boys to use when they identify scope of works is required. On this template, it has certain questions that we need to answer. So is temporary accommodation required? Is a plumber or electrician required? How many hours on site? How much equipment? Waste disposal? Is it a trailer? Is it a skip bin? So once again, it's creating those triggers for your team when they're looking at scoping a job. Have they thought of everything? Are they getting the right information back to the admin team, which stops us from calling the guys on site? So one of the biggest time wasters is when we don't have the right information and we have to call them, because not only are we disrupting them while they're at another job, it's taking up our time as well. So eliminating those phone calls by getting the right information first has been a big game changer for us.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, saving time, saving money.
Absolutely.
So, all right. So need to go back, step back a little bit, I suppose, um, with the technicians and the administration. So this claim's come in, it's a category 3 or black water loss. What if you've got, say, let's say you're a smaller company, you've only got 2 technicians, but one of those technicians has never done a black water loss and the other one is away or on another claim. Is there a way you can manage that staff member, I suppose, that other technician to go to site as an administration, like what to take and all that sort of stuff, or how to use their skills? Is that something you have in your disposal as an administration?
I guess that's kind of a hard question for me to answer because we have quite a large team.
Yeah.
I think if I was in that scenario and we had to send someone out to site who didn't have that experience, it would be gathering as much information as they could, but then having that senior person who's more experienced review it. So even within our own team, when the technicians do a scope of works, one of the senior people reviews it before it goes to the admin team. So I think having as many eyes over stuff is a good thing. But it's really hard if you don't have a technician who's experienced to know what to look for. I think that just comes with time and having that training. So while it's not cost efficient to have two people in the van all the time, if you're sending them out with that initial training and getting them to identify stuff on site, you're going to make much more money in the long run. So I think people need to realize that you spend that initial cost up front to make the money further down the track.
Yeah, it's an investment. It's a long-term investment. So what about the girls in the office? Do they go to sites, or how do they get a visual of what's going on?
So unfortunately, we've been quite busy for the past year. We've just been absolutely flat out, which is a great thing. But a lot of the time the girls will review. So we review every single photo. We don't just download the photos, we review them and we ask questions. So really big in our team is if something doesn't look right to you, ask the questions. I would like to get the team out more with the boys on site to have a look, because it's totally different from sitting in an office and reviewing photos to being out on the job site. But once again, it comes down to time for us. Okay. So the most value that I have at the moment is getting those reports through and making sure our suppliers are happy.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So eliminating, I'm still going to call it wastage. Mm-hmm. Is obviously a critical part. As a manager, who do you report to, and what are you finding I suppose the hardest part of managing administration, and what are you finding the easiest part, and where's the transition between being that administration to reaching a management position? Where does that sit in a restoration company for you?
So I report to the two owners of the company. So I'm kind of the bridge between all the employees and the owners. So for me, sometimes it is quite hard to justify the expenses that we spend on the administration team, and that I've never had to ask for anything though. If I say I need something, I'm always given it, which is a blessing. But I think performance-wise, over time, we've seen the increase in work, and it's a risk. Like you said, everything is a risk. So for us, we took the risk. We're now seeing and reaping the benefits. I think in the business, we have an administration manager as well and a technical manager, ensuring that those two are cohesive and they have a good line of communication as well. We don't like segregation in our company here.
Yeah.
For the administration team, it is a really hard gig, as well as the technicians, because you're expected to understand what's being put in the reports. I don't like my girls just flicking off a report without understanding it. It's really important that they ask the question, because sometimes the boys are busy, sometimes we miss one line, and one line could be the difference between a couple of $100 or $1,000. So understanding a claim from start to finish, and if they don't understand why the boys have done something, call them up, ask them, did you look at this? Have you forgotten this? And the more experience they get by asking those questions, the less phone calls they ask in future. So it's really rewarding to see how much the team has grown and how much they're invested in learning as well.
And I suppose the more they learn, the easier the role will become, isn't it? So it is very important that everybody does get together. You say you do weekly meetings, everyone comes together and discuss as part of those weekly meetings, what are you looking at? Are you looking at the good parts and the bad parts, or are you just looking at training, or
No, so
what's
what we do, we go through any wins that we've had for the week prior. So have we had any good feedback? Has someone done a really good job? We then identify if there's been any complaints, any safety issues that we've noticed, and then we just go through general, general things of we need to see more information in our manifesting, or we need to see more lines on the report. The technicians may have, for example, next week, I know we've got a massive scope of works on at the moment. So what we're going to do is we're going to get the lead technician who was on that job. He's going to go through the photos. We're going to get everyone to scope the job to see how many hours they would have put on there, how much equipment, and then discuss it as a team why we would have done certain things. That kind of helps to highlight the different things that people are looking for and try and get that consistency as well. So using your workplace scenarios is so valuable.
And look, if I look back on my career, I'm going to say it would have been 15 years ago now, but I was working for a company that specialized in fire. And I think one of the fondest memories I actually have looking back is not the cleaning, it's the experience of learning the other side of the business. What it actually does cost. How do you assign hours to a job, that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
What is the process there too? Because that's a very big portion of what you do with scoping, is getting those hours right.
Yeah.
How do you, I suppose, get them as close as possible? Obviously staying in with a percentage, but how do you get it to, how does someone that's new in this industry, let's say this sort of job, they had to go to site and they had to quote it up. And let's say, look, they've been doing carpet cleaning for, 8 years. They've done maybe 3 or 4 water jobs in that 8 years. But now they've come across this. How would one look at pricing up a job with this scenario?
Unfortunately, I think a lot of the time it comes from experience. Knowing how long it takes to complete a task comes from experience of watching other people do it. So there's a big difference between setting up a containment in a doorway to a containment across a whole room. So talking to people who have done it previously and asking those kinds of questions would really help. When the administration girls are looking to cost things, we'll ask, how long does it take to set up the containment? How long would you take to remove the walls? And those are questions that help us understand when we get given times whether they seem realistic or not. The girls are also trained that if they don't think something sounds right, pass it on to a senior manager. So we've got a senior technician. We've also got the owners in the business. If you're ever concerned, ask the question. And for us, it's always about adding that little bit of buffer on there as well. So quite often we're removing wall linings. We have no idea what's behind there. So you have to add that little bit extra in to make sure. It's much better to come under and reduce the price than it is to go over. People hate variance. Like they hate the price being changed. Yeah. Variations, that's it.
Yeah. Yeah, people certainly like to see that there's a discount or something put on. Yes. And look, that is the very contentious point of pricing, guys, when you're looking at this sort of stuff, is it is a guess, but it's a guess made on past experience. And if you don't have that past experience, the best thing I can advise you is to break the job down into manageable portions and just go through each room as its own job. How long does it take to extract? How long does it take to set up? How long does it take to do the administration? And break it down room by room. That would be my biggest advice for anybody new, or even people that are doing it that may not know how to get the best out of quoting. They might be scared of doing something. To me, it doesn't matter the size of the job. If I can break it down to bite-sized portions, I can come up with a very clear pathway of how I want to run that job and the cost that's associated with that job. And that also brings in that project management skill as well. And I think the biggest thing that what you're talking about today with these admin staff is project management skills. And I think it's very underestimated, the benefits of somebody who can multitask or project manage or however you want to call it. But remember to, ask for this, find out this, see this, charge for that. Not get distracted when the phone rings to come back and actually do that job properly as well. So in your office, obviously I've been at your office, the phone rings ridiculous amount of times during the day.
Yeah.
How do you set yourself goals or tasks to manage that the administration side is getting done in the 24 hours allocated to actually get it done? What's the process there?
So during the super busy times, we allocate people certain tasks. So for example, one person will take all the phone inquiries, one person will manage the inbox, one person will solely be responsible for sending out first attendance reports. So we break it down. What's the most important thing? Answering the phone straight away, getting the reports out, and everyone is responsible for one task. If they complete their task, they then move on to helping someone else. So it's just about knowing what is most important to your business. And because we get absolutely crazy. We'll get hundreds of emails, hundreds of phone calls, and we still have to be meeting those service line agreements of sending the reports out within a reasonable time frame. So it is very much about juggling. I think in this type of industry as well, when you're recruiting, especially in restoration, you have to be upfront with people. It is going to get busy in the wet season. We will have to do extra hours. We try not to, but you want people who are willing to spend an extra hour behind, and we obviously compensate them for it, but understand that there's that need, and then we can relax a little bit in the quiet time.
Yeah. No, well said, actually. That's a really good explanation. So you've got to look at charging, I suppose, for like the coronavirus has been a big major factor for the last couple of years. So that's something that companies have had to look, I suppose, with staff being away, but also risks and the costs of that as well. How do you manage that in your business?
I think it's been easy because everybody is going through the same thing. So no one industry has not been affected by COVID. We all have people who are away sick for long periods of time. It's been hard to get to jobs. So for us, one of the things we manage is asking in that initial triage, is anyone sick or self-isolating? Knowing which jobs we can go to, which jobs we can't. When COVID first hit, it was virtually impossible to find the correct masks that we needed. So obviously our PPE costs went up. So that cost then has to be passed on to our suppliers. So understanding what the actual cost to your business and then communicating that with your administration team for when they're costing is really, really important. Not to do with COVID, but for example, I mentioned before, we have to tape down all the leads on our equipment to make sure that there aren't trip hazards. So in order to do that, we have to use a special type of tape that stays sticky and keeps it down, which is quite expensive. So it's thinking about all the little things that you spend on a job. So we could spend $5 or $10 on tape for every job. So that cost needs to be passed on. It's not just your time. It's not just the equipment. It's everything that you do. You've got to think about if you're using rags and then cleaning them back at the warehouse, you've got that cost of not only purchasing the rags, someone's time to clean them, the powder you use, the water, the electricity. So I think it's finding that balance of not taking it too far that people feel like they're getting ripped off, but ensuring that you're being compensated for the work and the money that you as a business are having to spend is really important.
Yeah, and I suppose at the moment we've got this, the fuel's going up, the price of that's going up. So we really do need to look at as an administration team, the cost as well. So you have a CRM. What are you looking for as a management part of the management team, looking into the cost of how the business is operating for each job? What are you looking for on that management side?
Um, for management, I obviously delve in quite deep and I look at every individual cost and make sure everything's ticking over. But the information that I pass on to the owners is more so how much we've spent on chemicals as a whole, as a business, how much we're charging for the charging onto our suppliers. It's more of a high level thing. So ensuring that at least our bare minimum costs are being covered. So if we're spending $10,000 on materials, so drop sheets, tapes, that sort of stuff, I want to be seeing at least that we've charged $10,000, if not the markup, because you've got to think about shipping as well. You've got to think about the time it takes to order these sorts of things, or someone might have to collect it. So it's looking at your business from a high level to begin with. If something doesn't look right, it's then digging deeper into it and making sure. So for us, we have one person do the initial costings and then a second person invoices. So that ensures that every little dollar is being accounted for.
All right. So last thing on price, I'm just going to throw this out there. This scenario, $700,000 building is insured for, $145,000 the content's insured for. Rough figures, doesn't have to be exact. You've done a few of these now. What do you think the a fair price for restoration for building and content would be on this sort of claim?
So this one is a little bit tricky because in the scenario it's mentioned that there's mold on some of the furniture already.
Yeah, let's take that mold out.
If we took the mold out,
yeah.
We're
talking 1,000, 5,000, or 10,000. Let's put it in those.
I'd be for a whole house, to remove the carpets, dry it, remove the skirting boards, manifest any content items. Our bill would probably be about 4,500 to 5,000.
Yep.
That's if it was labour and equipment. Contents, it's a bit hard. So from a restoration point of view, we don't actually give prices on how much contents are worth. We actually just take the pictures, give the description and what's wrong with it. That's then priced separately. So contents for us is a little bit different. The content side of things comes from the carpet. So if we were to dry the carpet and steam clean it, but for total building and contents, I'd say 4,500 to 5,000.
Okay. So again, this is a very small view, listeners, of one administration person that sits in the administration role, having a look at this claim. Once we get into looking as the restorers, again, we'll ask those questions again and see what the restorers think as well, because obviously they're going to have a different view. And we're going to get IEPs on, and maybe we'll have a look at the costs of IEPs as well, the cost to do PREs and PRVs, so pre-remediation evaluations and post-remediation verifications. And you'll see that by just looking at photos without actually physically doing the job on a daily basis, you can differ in prices. So I bring this up for a simple reason, is that a large insurance company put a scenario towards a large group of builders and restorers and asked them to come up with a price, and the prices range from $1,000 to $50,000. And the response to that was simply, that's why we can't trust you, is because no one can come up with the right price. And I don't think myself it's about trust. It's about the education and the training that we have now doesn't really delve deep into having SOPs, systemized practices that everybody follows. So it'll depend on the size of the company, the overheads that company has. It'll depend on the training of the person that goes to site. There's a lot of variations within the restoration industry that makes it very, very difficult to price one of these jobs. And again, if I'm looking at this job, category 3, looking at the job, I'm more about the $7,000 or $8,000 mark myself, is where I would be. But I'm looking at it as a business owner, looking at it as well, to cover costs. So again, not saying anybody's price is right or wrong. Obviously, we're looking at the market that I'm in, which is in Brisbane. If you're in a Melbourne suburb, it might be different. Sydney suburb opposed to somewhere in far north Queensland. Again, it's going to depend a lot of things on the environment, the outside, the inside, and then the scopes that have been provided. So this one's got yellow tongue with sewage on it. So that flooring looks like it may have to come completely out. So the building portion of that may be put towards a builder, and the remediation on the builder side might be an additional $15,000 added on. So there's a lot of variations in this, guys. Don't look at this as that is the price, or I'm giving you a price guide. I'm definitely not doing that, nor is Lydia. But what we're trying to do is get you to think about the background of what actually goes into looking at these types of claims, because this is what it's all about. It's about a scenario. It's a made-up fictitious scenario, but it's something you may come across, and you may look back at this and go, "Hey, well, they talked about this. How do I charge for that? How do I do for that? Or what I need my administration side to do for me for that?" So very important information has been gone through today. We're actually at the end of what I need to get through today, Lydia. A couple of minutes short, but it's not too bad.
Do better next time.
Only about 6 minutes short, so that's good. We like to keep these episodes around about 47 minutes. So it's been really good talking to you again, Lydia. I really do appreciate your time. Thank your bosses; they're great people for allowing you to do this, and I hope to see you again on a future podcast. It's been your insight's very good. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
By assessing this podcast, I acknowledge that the Professional Carpet Cleaners and Restorers podcast makes no warranty, guarantee, or representation as to the accuracy or sufficiency of the information featured in this podcast. The information, opinions, and recommendations presented in this podcast are for general information only, and any reliance on the information provided in this podcast is done at your own risk. The Professional Carpet Cleaners and Restorers podcast expressly disclaims any and all liability or responsibility for any direct, indirect, incidental, special, consequential, or other damages arising of any individual's use of, reference to, reliance on, or inability to use this podcast or the information presented in this podcast.